Well, I certainly hope you enjoyed that segment with Chris Novoselic. I think it's fair to say he's the most famous guest we've had on the show to date. And from my perspective, some of the stuff he's doing now, particularly on the fair vote front, is some of the most exciting stuff we've talked about to date. If anything else, I'm pretty sure my kids are going to watch today's show, so I have to be on my best behavior in terms of not saying like a lot, because that's what I tell them they shouldn't be doing. Anyway, I thought it might be helpful at this point in time to review some of the issues that Chris talked about. Fair Vote is a great organization. They're covering some great issues. And as I mentioned in the intro, this is our first dip into the water in terms of covering issues related to voting rights. We haven't been there before, and it's a very important part of incumbency protection that we've got to deal with if we're going to solve the polarization and the dysfunction in our political system. So first, let's take a look at the issues that Chris put in front of us, and then I'm going to add one from their website, you'll see in a second, and then we'll take a minute or two to work our way through the issues. So again, Chris is chairman of fairvote.org, and when you go to their website, and as he talked about today, they've got a list of priorities that they're focusing on. We talked with Chris in length about proportional representation. We talked about ranked choice voting. We talked about the constitutional right to vote. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so we didn't quite get to the popular vote for president, and the one that Chris did not get to at all, I believe, is universal voter registration. So let's spend a moment or two. Let's spend a moment or two to talk about these issues and why they're important. The first issue, again, proportional representation. Now, this ties into a sequence of demographics that we talked about on our last show, really how Congress does not represent the population. It's significantly whiter than the population in general. It's significantly more male than the population in general. And by going to proportional representation, as you heard Chris mention, one of the things that we'll do is we'll give you a much more balanced representation in the legislature. Obviously, executive branch is, one person, so that's going to be what it's going to be. But within the legislature, for those of you that think it's important to have more balance and a more representative legislature, whether that be in Congress or at your states, it's important to reflect the population that they're representing. So this proportional representation will help get us closer to that. The second one, ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting. I'm not as familiar with the pluses and minuses of ranked choice voting, but one of the things it's geared to do is to avoid this situation where you go to the ballot and you pick one person, which is historically the way it's been done. It's a way to rank your vote so that if it turns out your choice doesn't win, but it also turns out that the winner does not have a majority of the vote, there's kind of an instant re-ranking of the vote. And that way, had you known your choice wasn't going to win, maybe you would have voted for someone else, and you might get a slightly different result. For students of the ranked choice voting, I know there's some other subtleties that are involved. And as you heard Chris mention, this is being used in a lot of places across the country. And also, as you heard him mention, we talked about the first issue, the proportional. That's being used all over the world. We're one of the few countries that aren't using that. So these are not new topics. They're just new topics to our country, and certainly would be new topics at the federal level. The third issue, constitutional right to vote. This is an issue that I've been reading about, not a lot, but hearing about, because people don't realize, and quite frankly, I didn't realize, that the U.S. Constitution does not guarantee the right to vote, and that's why there have been amendments to the Constitution to bring voting groups into the equation. But I think what happens is that at the state level and occasionally at the federal level, they try to pass laws that might in some way deflect people's right to vote. And the thinking, I believe, is that if there was a constitutional amendment, it would certainly help with the litigation of these issues, if not just prevent the sometimes the nefarious behavior in trying to limit voting. So constitutional right to vote. The last one that Chris mentioned on the show, popular vote for president. I know for a lot of people this is certainly a leftover from the first Bush-Gore, for the first Bush election, but Bush-Gore, where Gore actually had more popular votes than President Bush, who got elected through through the electoral system. And there's some people that just want to get this fixed because I think they believe that over time, should that happen again, it just makes a bit of a mockery out of the system. So fairvote.org has made one of their priorities the notion of electing the president purely on the popular vote. And then finally, Chris didn't mention it, but when you go to their website, you see the notion of universal voter registration. Voter registration is one of the areas, I think, where games get played. In some states, let's say where there's Democratic populations, they may try and make it easier for the minorities to register to vote. Sometimes it's shown to be difficult for minorities to take time off work or do what they have to do to register for vote. Similarly, in some other states, often with Republican representation, they may take steps to try and limit minority vote because, let's face it, traditionally minorities have not been voting for the Republican Party, or at least of late. So these are the priorities of fairvote.org. We always try to get you interested in issues and step up. So perhaps take a look at the fairvote.org website. I think that's going to be today's homework assignment. And see if there's an issue here that excites you. I know Chris Novoselic would love to hear from you. So if you're a fan of Nirvana and you want to talk some politics and maybe a little music with Chris, reach out to him, get excited, get involved in his organization.